Hey everybody, welcome to Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades. I'm Elizabeth, and to my right is the Honorable Gary S. Hopper. Wait, I'm not Elizabeth. Why would you say that?
Well, hope springs eternal.
I mean, we look very different. She's blonde.
She is
and I'm
different,
not.
but I was just hopeful that Elizabeth would be here again.
Oh, I
she
see.
is a lot easier on the eyes.
It's because she's blonde, right? I see how it works. I see how you are. You just like her because she's blonde.
I'm sexist.
I still think you should just make me your permanent co-host. She's probably going to show up again in 5 years. You just can't depend on her here.
Right, but I'll boot you out in a heartbeat if she's around.
I understand.
Nothing personal.
No. That's why I wear armor under my shirt.
Oh, good, yeah.
You boot me.
Anyway, tonight we have Emily Sandblade, who was a state representative from the big city of Manchester, but you've escaped to Goffstown.
Quite an improvement, I might add.
Oh, really? Wow.
Oh.
I don't think it's a good idea to insult the people. Anyway. I didn't say that out loud. And Carla Gericke.
Yes.
Gericke, and you're running against Mr. Lou D'Alessandro.
I am, District 20.
District 20. How old is he? Like 500? Or does anybody... Like, was he around during the... was he there to sign the Declaration of Independence? Or do we know?
Almost.
If he was, he kind of forgot what it was all about.
Right, yeah. His mind's slipping a little bit on that, yeah. Because he is a nice guy. Don't get me wrong.
He's one of the few Democrats you've been able to get to come on the show.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah.
And I like him. He's a really likable person, which is why people, I think, vote for him. But I'm not sure they would if they actually knew how he votes. You know? Explain some stuff. Give us some instances.
Yeah, and sure, Lou's been around for a long time, and I'm not really that interested in trying to take him down. I just want to give people another opportunity. I'm running as a Republican. There was no one on the ticket against him. I had just bought my house in West Manchester. It's the first home I've ever owned. And when
really?
I realized he was, running uncontested, I said, look, at least, I'm going to throw my hat in the ring. I have some good ideas about what I think the future should look like. And so, I'm interested in individual liberties, making sure we stick to the Constitution. Let's make sure we stick to the New Hampshire Constitution. And so, Lou, big gambling guy. I'm pro-gambling, but I don't think we should be creating state monopolies for anything. Right. So if we're going to do it, let's open it up. Let's make sure everyone can do it. And let's not, make things that, poker game on a Sunday in your basement,
Right.
a legal issue.
He is a big he's like the gambling guy in the state.
you know that every year I have to vote against something Lou has introduced and or is part of, because it's always the same thing. And I will vote against it anyway, period, because I think it's gambling is just basically is a non-productive revenue stream. And in that, I don't know what the correct terminology is, but if I create a factory and I take, raw metal and I make it into something and I sell that product, I am adding value to something and employing people, and, then that's sold at the local shops maybe or wherever. I'm creating multiple jobs, high-tech jobs, and it's a great advantage to the community, okay? Because you have, a lot of people earning money. When you go to gambling, the only thing it does is redistribute the wealth of the middle and lower income bracket people, because they have delusions of grandeur that they're going to get strike it rich and never have to go back to deal with that cotton picking boss or whatever it is. But what it ends up being is if you put a gambling casino in, let's say at the Verizon, all those businesses like the restaurants and things like that will start slowly but surely drying up, and you will kill all the businesses within a so many mile radius, and you will get rid of all the disposable income in that so many mile radius. And the local hardware store will go out of business because they're running on a pretty pretty narrow margin, you know. So if all of a sudden, instead of Bob buying a couple dozen 2x4s to start building his deck, he's already spent that on the slot machine on Friday night. So he's not building his deck. He can't buy. He's not buying nails and he's not buying paint. So your hardware stores go. The casinos always have restaurants that they're sucking you into, and so all what's our friend that owns the place down the street, the pub restaurant Murphy's,
Yeah.
places like Murphy's, they're done. They're done. So I always vote against gambling because I think it's just an illogical revenue source. But
and
I also vote against it when I'm telling people is exactly what you said. It's unconstitutional. Article 10 of the New Hampshire Constitution says government is not for the private emolument of any one group or family of people. So government can't pick winners or losers. It can't say, here, this group of people and this group of people get to build 2 casinos, and everybody else...
Tough luck.
And you know the process is completely corrupt
Oh,
anyway.
it's absolutely
Of course,
corrupt.
Well, all of the measures that they've proposed in the last few years have basically been to benefit Millennium Gaming, which is an out-of-state gaming organization. And when the profits are redistributed, you're talking about redistribution. It's not redistribution between people in New Hampshire even. It's redistribution to Millennium Gaming, who is located out of state and has their corporate operations quite out of state.
I wonder, is Millennium Gaming, does anyone know if that's where Lou gets his campaign contributions?
Some of his money appears to come from there.
Not surprising.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they also support Maggie Hassan, of course.
Of course they do.
Yeah.
Of
Yeah,
course.
Maggie's actually changed, from my understanding, has changed her position on gambling because they started donating money to her campaign.
Funny how that works.
Yeah.
It's funny how that works.
The thing, too, about gambling is a lot of people have a misconception that it's a panacea to whatever budgetary woes your state has. Oh, you open a casino and then you're swimming in money. And it really doesn't always work that way.
No, you end up swimming in debt.
Yeah.
If you look at Connecticut, they have gambling, they have an income tax, they have a sales tax, they have property tax. Guess what happens?
Well,
Just more money goes
Yeah.
into the pot, and more friends figure out. Like we were talking about that on Norm's show just before this. He was asking me about the drug problem. Okay, isn't the one of the questions is in the legislator doing anything? Legislature, we did. Okay, $1.2 million. Now, we have Hope for Recovery. I've had them on the show. You know those people. These are the salt of the earth. These are the people who have solutions, who are working on the ground trying to get something done, right?
Right.
Did the state of New Hampshire said, here's, you're trying to open up this facility here and here. Here, take this money and get the job done. Nope. They sent $1.2 million to a contractor in New York whose boss makes $500,000 a year.
I didn't know about this.
$500,000 a year, and your tax money went to it. Why?
Wow.
They have better connections than Melissa Cruz does. That's all it amounts to.
I didn't know about any of that. Wow.
Well,
That's
those votes
horrifying.
don't buy themselves, you know.
No,
Right.
no. I was talking about to my pharmacist. I was asking for a little bit more information on the EpiPens because I've got a
Yes.
peanut allergy. All right. She says, "Oh, it's worse than it's in the paper." I says, "Really?" She goes, "Oh yeah." Remember, she says, "Keep in mind, EpiPens have been around." She says, "When I graduated school 22 years ago, they already had EpiPens. They haven't changed. It's still epinephrine. Same thing, hasn't changed. The price has, gone up by I don't know how many 1,000%, and they've changed the rule so that every elementary school has to have one for the little kids, one middle school for the middle kids, and one for the high school. And the company that sells it changed the rules again to say you have to buy them in sets of 2.
Tax, yes.
You cannot buy a single EpiPen.
Wow.
Okay, so they're $300 and something or $400 a shot. I think that was her cost, right?
Yeah.
And you have to buy 2. So they're willing to kill people for profit. They're willing to. That is what separates me from the true dyed-in-the-wool capitalist. To me, capitalism without morality is tyranny in a different dress.
Well, really, what you're talking about here, to some extent, is cronyism, right?
Yes,
so if we look
cronyism,
at
yes.
something like crony capitalism, as
Yep.
I like to call it, crapitalism, is so with the EpiPens, first of all, protected by patents,
Yes.
right? So
Well,
that's a monopoly from.
I don't think so, because
I think initially it was.
Initially
yes.
it was, but not now.
And so, and there's one source that you can get it from, and then you throw in a little bit of Obamacare, and, we're just going to socialize all these costs across the board, and suddenly you start to get these things in the mix, where people go, well, I'm looking out for myself, and I'm going to do crapitalism. So really, we have to look at the source of what the problem is, and I think in a lot of these cases, when you kind of follow the source all the way down, you realize government's got their finger in a lot of pies that they shouldn't be having their fingers in, and that we could solve things by having smaller government, lower taxes. If we take away the tax money, then they can't come up with all these crazy ideas to stick their finger in every pie.
Yeah, I think like you're correct. Like the Obamacare, I'm pretty confident. I don't know, but I'm pretty confident. Like, for instance, the woman who owns that company, or the CEO of that company, I should say, is the daughter of a congressman, Democrat.
Yeah,
You're right.
Daughter of a senator.
yeah, that's
Senator.
US senator.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes.
I wrong class of people.
Yeah, I mean, you have to move up the food chain.
Yeah, way up the food chain. I'm sure they said, well, in their rationale, well, the taxpayers through Obamacare are paying for it anyway. What does it matter?
Well, it's very annoying because it's not really a free market at all.
No.
A free market would say, well, we've got, a dollar's worth of epinephrine and we've got to put it in a dispensing unit. And the dispensing unit probably costs another couple of bucks or so.
Yeah, I would
And-
say total cost $3. So.
Yeah, and even with the FDA, approval process and everything, you're not talking about a
Yeah, but
huge
it's already
amount.
that's already been amortized. I mean, that's long gone. Research and FDA approval is long ago. They've
Sure.
made that money 20
But
years
the
ago.
chances are we're looking at maybe what should be out there is a $30 or $40 unit, not a $300 or $400 unit.
Correct.
And in a free market where you had real capital, real competition out there, you would see that. People like me would be going into business because if I could get
Right.
like 50 or $100 a unit, I could just make the profit.
Right.
Right.
And it'd be a nice profit to give my shareholders.
Oh yeah.
I don't have to sell it for $350. I can sell it a lot cheaper and still make a hefty profit.
Right.
But the way the rules are being set and the way that crony capitalism is working is they're cutting out competition out of the
Yeah.
market. These people used to have two other companies competing against them, and they're gone now.
Well, the healthcare lobby and the pharmaceutical lobby, I mean, they helped write Obamacare. It's no coincidence.
No, it isn't. I mean, it's the same thing. You probably don't know this, but I was kicked out of work 3 years ago because I've got glaucoma and I was a tool maker. So they figured, well, while he's still got his fingers, let's Aetna.
It's kind of cold, though.
Anyway, Aetna was my insurer for long-term disability. And after 2 years, they said, well, of covering me, they said, oh, sorry. We think, actually, it's because I'm a legislator, they says, we think you could easily make, 80% of what you used to make as a tool maker in an office setting. Doing what? Typing? I can't spell. Okay? It didn't matter. You know why? And they know it doesn't matter. You know why? Because Aetna, the insurance companies have made the deal with probably the same senator, I don't know, that the appeals process goes through a federal judge. I've never been to court. It's gone through the court. I've never seen a judge. I've never sat down in front of like a jury. If they're denying me, what they promised me, the contract they signed, I paid into for I don't know how many years. I've never had a day in court. But it already went through the courts and it already goes through a federal thing. It's all a scam. And I talked to my cousin who does finances and stuff. He said, oh yeah, Aetna does that all the time.
Oh, they're well known for that.
Yeah. They absolutely there's no morality at all. It's profound, and you don't have any recourse in the system because of the same thing you're talking about. It's crony capitalism.
Oh, I'm very familiar with that. And I had health insurance with them at one point. And,
Oh, with Aetna?
Yeah, and I unfortunately contracted bacterial meningitis when I had insurance with Aetna, and had a very interesting time getting them to pay the cost of hospitalization for that.
Wow. Did
Yes.
they eventually? Did you win? Or?
They eventually paid up, but they tried to say, because I was out of state when I got sick, they said I should have taken an ambulance with bacterial meningitis. I was dying at the time that I went to the hospital.
Yeah.
But I should have taken an ambulance back to my home state, which was 2 states away.
Wow.
What?
Yes, that's what they
And
insisted.
that's why they weren't going to cover you.
Exactly.
Wow.
It's a pretty interesting story, and of course, what I then did was, of course, sent a letter to my previous states, the in-state Department of Insurance, and then Aetna decided that they didn't want to deal with challenging it.
Good.
And of course, that's so frustrating, right? The red
Yeah.
tape,
Oh, yeah.
because it's stealing your time, productive time that
Yes.
you could be doing something else
Yes.
with to deal with all these things that, are just not good. They're not good for the economy. They're not good for you personally. They're not good,
Right.
for your mental health. I mean, it's extremely frustrating.
Oh no.
Well, and even that is a result of the simple fact that we don't have an ability for insurance companies, health insurance companies, to offer insurance across state lines.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And that's more crony capitalism,
It
of
is.
course.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think it was Gene Shaheen. I think was one of the ones who kind of helped set that up.
Yes,
my
that was a
understanding.
lovely situation. We used to have 8 insurance companies
Yep.
that offered individual policies, and when Obamacare finally kicked in, we were down to 1 insurance company that offered individual policies in the state.
Are we still down to 1, or are there a couple?
You can actually go onto the exchange, and there's 3 insurance companies offering
Yeah.
plans on the exchange, although the exchanges themselves are starting to collapse in
Yes.
a number of states. There's been something like 23 states where they've had a withdrawal of insurance companies.
Well, there's
and-
one big insurance company that I forget who it is that opted out
Recently
pretty
here.
much everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, there are several that have.
There's a couple have gone bankrupt because they can't afford it, because they were basically told they have to offer this price. Mm-hmm. So all the people that never had insurance before jumped on board, and they're only paying for it because they know they've got problems.
Mm-hmm.
It's not insurance per se.
Right.
Insurance is the idea that, hey, I'm going to give you so much money, if something happens, you help me out. No, that's not insurance. What they're doing is, I got problems, so I'm going to join in this. They have to take me. And so all the people going into the system were, people who needed, boatloads of care, and it just crumbled and killed them.
Well, and also one of the consequences of Obamacare, and it's something that people don't talk about very much, is they reward you for being sick. They do not reward you. They penalize you for trying to be healthy.
Yeah.
And
Also-
that's a real problem, because if you really want to have an insurance system that works, you want an insurance system that rewards for people for being healthy. But we refuse to do community ratings. We refuse to give people a break if they're non-smokers.
Yep.
We refuse to do a lot of things, and that's legislatively done.
Right.
We refuse to do a lot of things that would allow people to cut their cost of insurance by taking good care of themselves and becoming
Right.
lower risk in the system. So what we're really doing is we're paying people to smoke, we're paying people to eat badly, we're
Right.
paying people to engage in practices that are less healthy, to do things that are less healthy, because we're going to cover them no matter what.
I think in the macro, though, there's this weird cultural thing in this country where there's just not much thought put into preventative care to begin with. It's kind of a weird thing. I remember noticing this when I was a kid. It's like everybody focuses on what to do if you get sick, but there's not much. I mean, there's health clubs and stuff, and there's diets you see advertised on television, but it seems like I've heard a lot of doctors say there's not nearly enough focus on preventative care, preventative maintenance, if you want to call it that. It's all on, what happens when you get sick.
Right, and I mean that also leads to a lot of the pill popping, and all of even certainly with the situation right now in New Hampshire with the opioid situation, it's over prescription of pain medicine, and we know, and I'm a proponent for medical marijuana. I think we should be looking at the qualifying.
Hey, if you guys, I was thinking about that today. Emily, you might remember this. Is it a concurrent resolution that is an appeal to the federal government to do X or Y? Is that a concurrent resolution? What is
It
there?
has to be a resolution.
It's a
yes.
resolution, but I forgot what it's called. we need a resolution. I'm probably going to introduce that in, if I win my primary, to tell the and I don't know how to word it yet. I got to get somebody. Maybe we can put our heads together, but to require or request that the federal government get rid of the stipulation in the law that restricts people from using medical marijuana. In other words, to have a federal medical marijuana so that it's not an illegal drug, so you don't concede your Second Amendment rights just because you have cancer.
Absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
was actually very shocked when I read that they're sort of tying these two things together, right? So in New Hampshire now, if you get a medical marijuana card, which you could for glaucoma, of course, you
Or
would.
cancer.
Right. Well, yeah, you know,
I mean, we're
and,
talking
and,
serious illness here.
and I think that those qualifying criteria could probably be expanded a little. I think it was
Yeah.
very narrow, you know, something like PTSD.
PTSD, absolutely, that should be on there.
You know, I mean, I know of lots of veterans who actually do get relief from you know, trauma with that, but so we should be looking at expanding. We should be looking at expanding that to really help people. You know, I mean, it is a form of medicine, and I think
Yeah.
it could help with the opioid crisis. I read a study
Absolutely.
today that said, you know, 25% less deaths due to heroin or oxycodone or opioid overdoses in states where there is medical marijuana. And then you
Absolutely.
have to start to look at the medical to say, okay, well, which are the qualifying conditions? And then say, okay, can we expand this? Can we actually help people by taking them off something that is extremely addictive and giving them a form of medicine that can actually help them in the long term?
But it's also
Absolutely.
the medical marijuana is real helpful for glaucoma because if you do go blind, you don't care.
Well, it relieves the pressure, too. So it actually slows down the progression.
Right.
But I think you've got a very valid point in pointing out that just because you're using medical marijuana because you're really ill is not a reason to deprive people of their basic constitutional rights.
You're talking about, just to clarify, you're talking about Second Amendment rights.
Well,
That's
but if they can go after your Second Amendment rights,
other
what's
rights.
to keep them from going after anything
Well, yeah,
else?
no.
But
that's-
how did
it's
those
quite-
two things tie together?
quite-
Is
it's
that
because
just the AG?
Because
or?
of that form you got to fill out.
If you look
When you go to buy a gun.
when after the show, we'll go buy guns.
Oh, neat. That's awesome. I never get to do anything. This will be great.
Anyway, when you go to buy a firearm, okay, you have a form that you fill out. You know, were you ever dishonorably discharged? Were you, do you have any felonies? Are you under a restraining order? Are you the user of any illegal drug, including marijuana? Now, remember, it's a federal law. Marijuana is still federally illegal. The fact that New Hampshire says go for it does not change the federal law. So now you would either A, have to say, yes, I am the user of an illegal drug, in which case you're not going to get the gun, or say, no, I'm not the user of an illegal. Now you've committed a felony by lying on that form.
There was a court
I'd say-
ruling on this recently. I'll
There
try to find it. Yeah, that there was a court ruling where a judge ruled that that the federal government can't hold it against you, essentially, if you are lawfully using medical marijuana
And it's not lawful.
in your state.
Well,
Right, but
because
the
I mean,
ru-
it should be a nullification issue, right? It should
Right.
be an issue of, you know, a state's
Yeah, but
rights should trump in this case because
Right.
the state has decided they're going to do something, and
And
they
that's what
should-
this
I
judge decided.
I
I'll see
agree
if I
that
can
that's
find
true, and even if a judge in California has decided otherwise, it still does not make it. It still means that somebody who's got cancer and can use marijuana to relieve that stress is still under that yoke of possibly being prosecuted if the police just don't like them.
Oh, geez. Well, apparently there's been more than one ruling because I just found here when I tried to Google that, appeals court upholds ban on gun sales to medical marijuana card holders. So that's obviously a different case, but
Yeah, so it's probably going to go to the Supreme Court eventually.
yeah. Ninth U.S. Circuit Court.
But that's something that the
That's
United
not good.
States Congress could remedy reasonably easily, and I don't think there'd be much pushback. They don't have to actually say that marijuana is legal, but they could say that marijuana, for the purposes of medical reasons, if should be allowed if it's allowed by the state that the person is using it.
Okay, so I guess this court overruled the previous court, is what it was. Well, that's
So
really.
yeah, it's definitely.
This
gonna
just
go to the
happened
Supreme.
2 hours ago. This was
Wow.
reported.
Wow, that's really
That's really bad.
late-breaking news.
That's not good news at all. That's not the way that
which
should
court?
go.
Which court
think it's
overturned the
in-
ruling?
The Ninth U.S. Circuit Court.
Oh yeah, the
is it?
Ninth Circuit. So the
Cali-
next step is the Supreme
It's
Court.
California,
Okay.
right?
Yeah,
Yep.
that's
Yeah.
California, and I believe it's
Oregon.
also Oregon and Washington.
Yeah, they're communists out there anyway.
Well, they do call
They're
it the
communists,
left
but they grow some
coast.
good weed.
Wow, you don't
you
know
go.
that personally.
I lived in California.
I know. I realize that. I realize.
We
But you
understand
don't-
up in Humboldt County, it's the leading agricultural crop,
Yeah.
Oh, really?
which is the far northern end of California.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I thought Kentucky was where it all came from.
Well,
Kentucky?
I have no idea. I haven't ever heard of Kentucky as a source, but
Yeah.
it's not
Yeah,
like
if you
I'm.
go-
But there are
You go-
certainly states that are looking at hemp as well in terms of just production of, materials, so the hemp plant itself. And I think there was a bill that was introduced here maybe 4 years ago,
Yeah,
6 years ago.
that's
I believe raising hemp in New Hampshire is actually legal at this point, if I remember correctly.
I don't know. It's been
Should be.
that one of those bills comes up every 2 years. I was first elected in 2000. Every 2 years, same thing.
Well,
It
there's
was-
an awful lot of bills that keep coming up.
You know, all these
And-
people too who don't understand, like they think hemp is the same thing as marijuana. If you're raising hemp, that means you're automatically, I don't know, you get high automatically if you go near it or something.
Well,
Yeah, you have to-
my understanding is the amount of THC is so low in it that you could smoke it all day and never get
Right,
high.
right.
No,
exactly.
you have
That's
to
what I've
actually
heard.
burn a lot of rope to actually catch a buzz. Not that I've ever done it.
Somebody is remembering the Titanic song where the first mate came on with 97 and a half feet of hemp rope.
I don't know.
That was popular when I was in college, which kind of dates me.
Well, if you're on the Titanic, you want
Then
to
you
smoke that up anyway. Cause
Okay,
might
so
as well.
so
It
anyway, well, the other positions you take, Second Amendment. Why? I assume you're pro Second Amendment.
I am
assume,
pro-Second Amendment.
Why?
Why? Because it is our last defense against tyranny, if we have to get into the nuts and bolts of it.
Exactly. I asked that of Ruth. Now I'm going to forget her last name. She's running in my district. I saw her at Dunkin' Donuts. Because I like asking that to candidates, because if you listen to most, especially the D.C. candidates, do you believe in the Second Amendment? Oh, I used to go hunting.
Right.
What's that got to do with the Second Amendment?
Right.
What you don't have a constitutional right to go hunting. You can't just go shoot deer.
Remember the picture of Obama with the shotgun?
Oh, my.
Oh, that was such a
In
joke.
2012, that was hilarious.
That was wicked funny. It was.
or it wasn't a shotgun. It was what was it like?
No,
a
I think it was
shooting
a
gun? I
shotgun.
don't know.
It would be a
Was-
shotgun.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah. No, his comment that I mean, that tells you pretty much everything. His comment that the talking, I think, about the people in Pennsylvania cling to their religion and their guns, is, to me, said everything you need to know about Obama. A, he doesn't understand Christianity, and B, he doesn't understand the Second Amendment. Because it's not a matter of clinging; it's a matter of maintaining it to, like you said, to maintain the balance of power in the hands of the people. I mean, they're this corrupt now when we're armed. Can you imagine if we were unarmed?
Well, and, it's...
Crony capitalism would be.
We'd be slaves to the crony capitalist.
Well, and it's
much.
also, I mean,
If
it's
that were
pretty
the case.
scary if you start to look also at, we've talked a little bit about the drug war and guns and, and issue I'm sort of seeing is the militarization of the police that's sort of happening, right? So, the Bearcats and the tanks, and, we all see the things on the news where, different cities are up in arms and, people have rolled in. I just saw a trailer for a movie that I'm actually going to try and see if I can do a showing down at Chunky's maybe in Nashua, where it's Do Not Resist is what the documentary is called, and it was made by a guy whose dad was on the force his entire career. So this is not someone who's like anti-cop or anything. It's
Yeah.
someone who grew up in a police family, who was in Watertown when after the marathon bombing, and saw these tanks roll in and saw these, what he said looked like soldiers, and he was so shocked by that that he sort of started investigating, hey, when did this kind of happen, and where was this turn?
He kind of woke up a little bit late, didn't he?
Well, yeah, but sure, but at least he woke up, which is a plus. And so he started making his documentary, and he had full access to all trade shows and talk about capitalism. That's the military-industrial complex that's sort of bleeding over into our police forces too.
Yeah.
And he had full access, and he got really good footage. And then something happened. I think it was after the Baltimore shootings, when the mainstream started saying, wait a second, what's going on here? And you would read these reports on liberal, rags, Huffington Post and stuff, where people are like, why can't we get numbers for how many people, civilians, have been shot by police? Why is this information not available, right? And, I was like, yeah, I know. This is something I study, and we would want to know. And so they cut off his access after that, and he didn't think he'd be able to finish the documentary, but then in the end did. And so I'm really interested in sort of seeing that and sort of seeing how all of these pieces of the puzzle fit together, because these things aren't happening in isolation, right?
Yeah.
We literally have a war on drugs, and we can debate which drugs, right, are good or bad, or, and I think there is a spectrum, but certainly like the war on marijuana, which is a plant that actually we are now dispensing to people as medicine, has become this war on people. So suddenly now the war on people means we have to, arm the police to fight this war and this battle in the streets of our country. And it's too much. I mean, I think we really need to start to go back to the basics. We need to go back to the Constitution. We should say, what should government be doing? If you're supposed to protect and serve, then protect and serve us. Don't lock down my neighborhood, which is why I decided to run for Senate, because that is not something that should happen regardless of what the situation was that made them do that, whether it was, that the police officers got shot, or if it was just some random other person who got shot. And interesting that those responses aren't necessarily the same, and should be something that we should look at. But, to say we're going to lock down this neighborhood and make an entire west side of Manchester, three schools were shut down.
Yeah.
I've talked to families who've said, I couldn't go to work. I lost my income for that day. Shelter in place. And they've sort of shifted the dialogue too, right? Because, some people were pretty upset about it. I was half a block away from where they were. I mean, there were helicopters over my house for 5 hours, and that's a horrible noise. I have to say, that is not my jam at all, And so these pieces all fit together, and so we need to start to say, let's go back to some of the fundamentals of how things should be working, and let's take it from there. Let's dial things back. If I win my Senate race, I want to repeal laws. Let's stop writing so many laws. Let's look at the bad ones out there and start to step back to where we should be.
I know that years ago there was a saying that, ignorance of the law is no excuse. Right now, I'm in the legislature, and I have no clue.
Right.
Oh, we all break laws every day.
It's like when I did that video. People out there, go to look up YouTube Rep Hopper, REPHOPPER, and then do my latest video was a way to keep your Trump sign safe. But in the video, I said I think this is illegal. I don't know. I mean, I know you can't booby trap something, a sign that would cause harm. That makes sense. You can't, protect your gladiolas by putting up, spikes that kill people if they run into it. You know what I mean? That's insane. But to scare somebody, not sure. But anyway, I want to pose you be devil's advocate for a second. Article 6 of the New Hampshire Constitution.
Yes.
Morality and piety being necessary for, and it used to say that it was the obligation of the cities and towns to instill in the people, specifically children, evangelical principles. The the purpose of that, whether you agree with the Christianity comments or not, the intent was, as long as you have a moral society, you can have almost unfettered liberty. Okay? In other words, if everybody at this table, if I trusted everybody at this table, leaving $100 bill on the table and then going down, down the street to get something and coming back, because we're in the poker game. Why would I leave $100 on the table?
Yeah,
anyway,
yeah.
or anything else for that matter, is because I know you people are moral, I can trust you.
Yes.
Okay? And at what point are we approaching a point where society, and I think it's mainly what the Democrats have done because they've created a culture of dependence, and dependence breeds animosity and frustration and everything else. Are we reaching that point where society is becoming so immoral that it can no longer be afforded the liberties that were intended for it to begin with?
I mean, I think that's a great question. I just happened to read this today. They did a study where they were sort of testing that on, I think it was at MIT, Princeton, and one other school. And it was all about cheating, how, people cheat in tests and whatever. And it's literally, an entire field of study by this stage.
Yeah.
And one of the things they found is if they made someone sign, and specifically I remember with MIT because it doesn't actually have a code of conduct, but they made the kids sign, I agree to, adhere to the code of conduct. None of the kids cheated.
Yeah.
On the test after that. And obviously this was a controlled setting. And
Right.
Princeton, that does have a very stringent code of conduct. And then in another one, they actually asked them to write the 10 Commandments. And not everyone could do it because, different religions, different whatever.
Sure.
But just the idea of sort of putting that morality on the forefront, no one cheated in those tests either. When they do it without the morality part of it,
Right.
something like 40% did cheat. So, yes. But the question is, how do we bring that morality back? And I think part of it is personal responsibility. The minute you start to outsource, someone else is going to take care of me, or whatever, then it becomes easy to just sort of go down that slippery slope. So
Right.
part of the going back to the basics is to say, these are sort of the moral code, and I think even worldwide, most people will agree. Thou shalt not kill seems like a good one.
Right.
And then maybe after number 5 we can start to debate which ones should be there. But I think in some ways the world's a little sick, and I mean that actually in a very specific diseased way. Things have just whether, like I said earlier, the medicines or the sodas or the
We need
food
global
or
Obamacare.
No.
Obamacare.
You're a
Yes.
genius.
Yes.
Who's gonna pay for that?
I don't know, the globe.
Someone else, right?
Yes, exactly.
No, that's easy. You just pay for that with carbon.
Or
Oh, the carbon
tax.
tax.
Carbon
Yes.
tax.
Well, good, because then it'll just be Al Gore.
Right.
There's no question that when people have a sense of entitlement, they can write off a lot of bad behavior.
Sure.
Like, it's okay to take from somebody else because I'm entitled to it.
Right.
When you've got you've got that kind of reasoning, then typical morality, things that really provide the glue to hold your society together, just it goes out the window. Because people come up with this rationale for breaking the common rules of society. But on the other hand, I do think, you do have a certain number of people who are behaving fairly immorally in the society right now. But just to give you an example, I don't think it's nearly as widespread as it appears. It's just that the people who are behaving that way have quite an effect.
Well, of course, yeah.
And an example would be in Oakland, California. We think of Oakland, California as being a pretty difficult place to live, one that we would not consider that to be a really very moral society. But I was talking to a police officer in Oakland, and he pointed out to me that there's about 10,000 people in Oakland out of a population of about 400,000, so 1 out of 40, who, about 10,000 of them are the criminal class. I mean, that's not what he called them, but he said they were the ones that made, committed most of the crime.
Kept him employed, you mean?
It kept them employed. Oh, they kept a nice big police force employed. But what happens is that he said that if you could clear out that 10,000, Oakland would be a really nice place to live.
Right.
And it basically says, okay, you've got 2.5% of the population who isn't playing nice with others.
Yeah.
And the other 97.5% are playing nice. And I think that in general you're going to find that. Here in New Hampshire, which I love living here,
Yeah.
just because of that, people have more of a sense of how to behave around other people, how to play well with other people.
No, it's incredibly safe here.
And,
Yeah.
you don't have much of a criminal class at all. It's very low crime rate.
Right.
And it's really a situation.
Is that because we shoot them?
Well, it could be at least, no, in the sense that it's an armed
Could be,
society,
cause
it's
and effect,
a polite society.
Yeah, no, I agree.
It's different here. A
It's
lot of
partly
people
that.
carry. And I think, it
Yeah,
keeps
'cause-
everyone on the straight and narrow, as it should.
Yeah,
But
'cause we're
there's
armed
not
to
nearly
keep
the
there
sense of
statistically.
entitlement here as there is in Oakland, of course. And there's not nearly the lack of, I mean, they've been in California school systems a long time, and our school systems haven't been nearly as compromised nearly as long.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Although,
They're working on it.
There's a culture here that's, more, I'll say moral here than there is, say, in Oakland, California. And that's in New Hampshire in general, and that's one of the reasons our crime rate is lower, because people have respect for that kind of value system.
To go back to your statement about the schools, and I wish I could, I can't find this quote. Maybe you ladies can find this. I tried high and low to find this, and I don't know whether it was Eisenhower or which president came to speak at Harvard. And Harvard used to start every day off at chapel. Okay? It was a divinity school. They used to start off at chapel, and he was speaking to the kids. And he said, and this is obviously back when it was mostly men, but that's irrelevant. He said that to give these young men the greatest education in the world without morality, we are only creating monsters. Just because somebody's brilliant, just because somebody has that gray matter that just works fluidly and fluently, if they have no morals, you're only creating monsters. It's like giving the worst evil person an AR-15 and says, "Hey, have fun." You know what I mean? It's that equivalent. It's even worse because they can twist and pervert that many more people at a time. And that's, I think, what we've done. We've created monsters coming out of some of these Ivy League schools that are, become the head of, one of these, drug companies that are willing to absolutely screw people out of every last penny they have because they can. Anyway, I'm getting angry. Anyway, so other subjects.
Well, understandably.
School choice. I mean, let's stick to school and education for a second. New Hampshire has a fair amount of homeschooling that's going on, some unschooling. Certainly, I don't know if you guys followed the situation in Croydon, New Hampshire, which was it's a small town. They only have a one schoolroom room. So the kids go to Newport when they're in middle and high school.
Yep.
And the school board, working with the parents, decided there were some kids that were very unhappy in the Newport school. So they sent them to the Montessori school. So it was 4 kids. Parents approved, the school board approved. These 4 kids went to Montessori. It was saving the taxpayers of Croydon tens of thousands of dollars. So we're saving money, kids are happy, parents are happy, school board's happy. Guess who's not happy? The DOE, right? Department of Education is like, no, wait a second, we can't have this happen. We can't have too much competition here. What if everyone decides they want to do this? So as the taxpayer, of course, you're like, well, why wouldn't we have more competition?
Why is
Right.
Why is any of the state's business to get involved?
Right. So
Because that's fundamentally that's the way government should work. Government should work that only those things the town can't do. Okay, not should do, but can't do, should the county do. And only those things the county can't do by itself should the state do. And only those things that the states individually cannot handle should the federal government get involved.
If only it worked that way, right?
That's exactly how it should work.
Well, sure, that's how it should work, but let's talk about creating monsters.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really what the federal government has become, right?
yeah.
I mean, it's so big,
Yeah.
and it's just everywhere and in every instance. And, I think, New Hampshire pays in more to the federal government than we get back. And the 70 cents on the dollar we get back comes with strings attached.
Right.
That does not seem like a very good deal
No.
for, us Granite Staters. I mean,
Frank
this-
Edelblum was saying, was it 7%?
6%.
6%
of the money that goes into education in New Hampshire comes from the federal government, but they put strings on it that
And they
cost a lot more.
They
Yeah.
control 50% of what we do, at least.
It's much worse than that. They're putting requirements on that are just almost impossible.
And they have to
meet.
let the boys go in the girls' room.
Well, it's like, can we get them out of our bedroom, boardroom, and
And
bathroom?
bathroom. Yeah.
The federal government shouldn't be dictating most educational policy.
Right.
That's really, it should be really up to the parents in the community to dictate what kind of education their kids are getting. It's the parents who have got the skin in the game here.
Yeah.
And of course, like, every child is unique. Let's talk, I'm a big proponent of individualism, and it's like, how can we take these kids and be like, you're all cookie cutter, and everyone who's the same age must somehow be the same, and and it's like, that's not how the world works. We all know that people are all different. They all learn in different ways. Some are readers, some are visual, some are, so let's get away from this, like, we're just going to treat everyone like they're that one, case study and that one thing, and
Yeah.
model the entire world on that. The beauty of the world is that we're all unique snowflakes.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
That's not something anybody's ever called me. So
They're a unique snowflake.
my wife's a teacher. It's even worse than that. You know why? Because the federal government, every 2 years, is kind of a new Congress or Senate. They'll come down and say, you have to do this. Okay, so now she teaches special ed. A few years ago, they changed all the rules
Right.
so that she had to be highly, not educated, whatever it is, qualified in math and science and language. So she had to be highly qualified to teach kids that are special ed. She was very qualified to teach special ed kids. Also, they changed all the parameters.
Yeah.
She's got to go back to school to get her master's degree, and taxpayers, basically have to pay for that. But anyway, they didn't pay for her education, but basically they're expecting people to have master's degree to teach school, but anyway, she says that what happens is they'll come down with all these rules, all these tests. Then 2 years later, they'll change it again.
Right.
Oh,
Then
yeah.
2 years later,
On a
they
whim.
change it
Yep.
again.
Yep.
And I don't think it's a whim. I think they have a deal with the people who write all these tests.
Oh.
There's another-
that
yes.
makes sense.
There's
Okay, and
huge
it's
money
it's a
in that.
crony
That's
capitalism.
crony capitalism,
Because
yeah.
if we can change the test, they have to come up with new curriculum. They have to come up with this.
good point.
Somebody's got to buy new books. Somebody's got to buy new computers. Somebody's got to buy all this new stuff. The kids haven't changed in 50 years, but all of a sudden we got to change everything, and they do it all the time. They're always running around because the federal government is whipped and changed their direction.
And it's also on an economic basis. It's sort of, after the 2008 crash. So, I'm kind of timing it. I think we're more or less ready for something to happen again. And a lot of people are saying there's this huge bubble in education, whether it's, the actual college costs, which just keep going up and
Oh,
up and up. And it's like, well, it's not going up for any other reason than crony capitalism.
Exactly.
And because, the federal government's underwriting the loans, and it's like, for any normal thing that happens where the government stays out of it, price goes down.
Right.
LASIK surgery, perfect example. It was something that was unregulated. It was operations that they do with the lasers on
Yep.
your eyes.
I had it. I
I
had it
had
done,
mine
yeah.
done,
Yeah.
20 years ago at this stage.
Yeah.
And the price of that has consistently dropped over the 20 years, because
Oh, yeah.
it was just something that was unregulated. I don't know how they squeaked it through.
It was 1,700 per eye when I had
Yeah.
it done, which was about 20 years ago.
Yeah. And you know, and
Now it's
that's
super
how the
cheap.
market should work. You know, I like to say, and I don't know if this is too radical, but you guys seem like you can take it.
No, I can't.
Gary's very sensitive.
Tell her how sensitive I am.
He's extremely sensitive.
Thanks, man.
Yeah,
You
extremely.
know, I think, you know, in the long term, thank goodness for technology and tech, right? Because I do feel like that's sort of one real opportunity place for us. So I like to look at it as, you know, government, there's an app for that. Like, we can really start to change things. You know, we saw it with Uber, right?
Yeah.
The car, you know, and it's so easy. I was just in Prague doing a talk a few months ago, and, you know, you get off the airplane and you
Oh, yeah.
Uber and your car comes and you don't have to talk to
What are you talking to people in Prague about?
about liberty.
Oh.
I went out for a students' conference. They invited me out.
Oh,
But
very
anyway,
nice.
as far as your college thing, you're absolutely correct. Because if it was a free market society, a young person would go to the bank and they would say, I want to do this, I want to get a student loan. And they say, well, what are you going to study? Oh, I'm going to study women's studies. And they would look at you and go, oh, that's a good idea. Good luck with that. You know, I'm going to. I've got really good grades, and I'm going for a bachelor's degree in computer science. That's worth writing a
Yep.
loan to,
Yep.
because they know they're going to get their money back. You know.
And so, you know, I mean, we have this inflationary monetary system, right? So they're just printing money. 2008, you know, they were like, oh, we got to keep printing money. We got to bail these people out. Now all the money's there, and it's getting super frothy. I was an attorney
Super
frothy. Yeah, I was an attorney for a long time in Silicon Valley at, you know, high tech firms, and went through the 2000 bubble
Yeah.
and saw, you know, what happened. It was like, oh, you know, every single startup was, you know, here's $10 million in funding.
Yeah.
And those things are starting to happen again. So, you know, if we can step back in New Hampshire, like, let's just keep it here, let's keep it local, and let's, you know, start to come up with our own solutions and just kind of go,
If you get when you win the Senate, will you support? Because I like I said, I have glaucoma. We have to go, but I want to get your promise now. Will you support
maybe.
high capacity magazines for hunting for the visually impaired?
Would this be only for the visually
Impaired.
impaired?
okay.
I don't
Yes.
think creating special categories for
100 round drum magazine. That way, if the deer is moving, you don't really have to see it as much.
I think
Because the worst possible thing, okay, you got to think of anytime you make a decision, what is the worst possible thing that could happen? And I've thought about it, and the worst possible thing, I end up with a free gun.
If that's the worst thing, that's a
the
great
worst
idea.
thing. Hey, we'll see you guys next week.
Bye, everybody.
All right.